Hello everyone, today we are going to be doing a crossbow only one life. The rules are crossbows only, one life, obviously, and mimic is allowed, and no other forms of damage. Early on, the class doesn't really matter, but we will be starting with the stone sword key so that we can be getting a crossbow early on from the round table hold. The weapon we will be using for the majority, if not all of this run, will be the pulley crossbow. It is very good at status effects, so we have a few essential items to grab along the way. Starting off with Torrent, and then we'll be running to the third church to grab the flask alongside of head towards Kaled to unlock our ball farm, if you know what that is. I'll be showing it quite a bit in this video. We will be upgrading our Estus as much as we can, grabbing golden seeds and sacred tears. And just a little bit about myself. I am a class 1 freight conductor, meaning I move heavy cargo all the time. I'm also remote certified, so I do operate the trains independently from an engineer. So the name of this YouTube channel isn't just a funny little pun, but it is my job description. And I also thought it would be really funny. My wife came up with it, and it just tickled me silly. So decided to run with it, and I love playing Elden Ring. So figured start doing some silly little challenge runs. This was actually quite a fun run. I did not expect it to be. I thought it would be really irritating and a long drag. Some of the later bosses, it was a drag, but all in all was a lot of fun to do. I do highly recommend this. But climbing up this tower here, we do grab the half of the Dectus Medallion to gain access to the Atlas Plateau so that we can head towards the volcano so we can grab our pulley crossbow. Climbing up this other tower so that we can grab the other half. And we are going to speed through this entire gathering section. This game has been out for years. If you don't know the gathering of all of this, it'll be here in a pretty quick fashion. Just a nice simple run all the way through. Nothing too interesting happened along this run, just making sure that I grab everything. I did grab the jellyfish shield. I never once used it. I really should have, though. Heading up towards the volcano, we grab our pulley crossbow and then we head over to Kayla to do some more ball farming so that we can have the levels to equip the pulley crossbow. And then we head up to Altus to grab some lightning bolts. The lightning bolts, surprisingly, were my favorite bolts this run besides the bleed ones. But we upgrade it to a +5 pulley crossbow, and then we go and fight Margit. Looking at that damage there, I was really worried that this would be a challenging fight. The pulley crossbow does not do that much damage, but luckily Margit is very squishy to a +5 crossbow. Unfortunately, though, my health is very much lacking, so any hit from him will do quite a bit of damage to me. Luckily, we get this done first try. A lot of his wombo combos, if they caught me, that would be pretty dangerous, and he got me down quite a bit. As you see by my Estus flask, I have 0 left. So dodging is something that I really need to get better at. Heading straight through the gate because going around is just much worse. I get shot in the face by a crossbow. Sitting back down at the bonfire to ease the pain and suffering of my poor character through this entire run. Running back through, I do not get shot in the face by a crossbow this time, luckily. Skipping the bonfire back there because there's no point in grabbing it. I get shot in the back of the head by an explosive crossbow and then nearly die right here. Panic rolling through all of this. I shouldn't have done that, but I survived, luckily. Then right here, I got gang banged by the giant and his buddies. Luckily, the giant decided to take it easy on me this time. Resting at the bonfire here before Godric, and then we challenge Godric. Looking at that first shot there, I was not excited about this boss fight until I realized that I had missed two shots. So a single arrow was doing pretty decent damage, especially with the lightning infused. I don't think he is weak to lightning though, so not a hard boss to dodge around. Going into second phase pretty quickly, just melting his health whenever he's doing his fire breath attack. And all in all, a pretty easy boss fight so far, but this is the beginning of the game. Resting at the bonfire, I put all my levels into health because health is very important this run. Heading back to Atlas Plateau, buying more of the lightning bolts. The lightning bolts ended up being a very good AoE with it, and I didn't realize that it had an AoE until later on in the fights. Heading back to Redmane Castle and the festival, since I'd already been to Atlas Plateau, the two bosses that are normally here are not here. Now the Radon Festival has begun. Feeling confident in myself for taking out Godric so easily, I thought that I could take out Radon as well, with little to no ease. So heading down the elevator after starting the festival, and running the long, unnecessary run all the way to the teleporter. It was at this moment that tragedy struck. Unfortunately, I had lost hours of work put into this run. I had lost the Radon fight, the Mimic, grabbing the Mimic tier, alongside of the Goldtree fight, which all those fights went decently well. Mostly just pelted everything with arrows until it died. But with that being said, we will continue with the run. I do lose recording later on as well. You will definitely see that part of where I lost it. And another little tidbit of things that I lost, I also lost completing White Mask's quest. So we will be heading down into Moog's Palace to grab bleed arrows, because those are the staple of this run. A lot of the later bosses were only defeated because I had those. The damage is very lackluster on this crossbow. Using the quit out method, I avoided that fight, which those guys are very difficult to fight with crossbows. So bought the bleed bolts and headed up to fight Morgott. Thinking I could just run past the assassin and just continue on to the boss fight, I took off. While I was checking my inventory though, she snuck up behind me and scared the crap out of me. So quitting out once again, I decided to turn back and head back to the bonfire. Equipping Morgott's Shadow, I thought it was time to challenge him, so summoning in the Mimic tier, and nearly died right here. That hammer is very painful to take in the face. So pinning him down, shooting him with the bleed bolts, getting bleed bolts very early was a good choice to make. The bleeds are incredible. And with me only having the bleed bolts equipped, the Mimic only shoots bleed bolts. So his damage is very lackluster, but that doesn't matter. Quickly getting him into phase 2, I can still lay on the bleed. Because of being at distance, I no longer have to worry about anything close. And luckily, he loved to target the Mimic most of this fight. Some expert dodging there that I was very worried that I would get clipped by. Not gonna lie, watching the Mimic get impaled right there was pretty amusing on my part. But not long after, we deal the finishing blow and bleed him pretty good. Heading up to the Erd Tree, we discover that we cannot enter the Erd Tree without burning it first. Heading back to the merchant, we buy some more bolts, because we run out of those quite frequently in this run. Then heading to Caelid to find the other merchants so we can buy some fire arrows. Now heading up to the capital so that we can find this merchant up here and buy some holy bolts. I don't think these ever came in handy though. But it's always good to have spare bolts in your back pocket though. Running our way through the capital so that we can get to the mountaintops, there's not really anything that stood in my way here. I just ran past everything. And right here, I somehow managed to get lost in this little foggy area. But quickly finding my way again, I head straight through to the Dectus. Now, unfortunately, I was very worried about this next boss, the Fire Giant. He has a lot of HP and does a lot of damage. So, sitting here contemplating what I'm going to do about this fight, I decide that maybe bleed bolts would be the best way, but I don't think I'm going to start with bleed bolts. Wanting to see how well my damage is first. I think we definitely need an upgrade to our crossbow first, so we head back to Caelid for that Somber Stone 8, and then head down a little bit for the Somber 9. Heading back to do a little more ball farming to get some souls. Went to buy the rest of the upgrading stones just to realize that I don't have a Somber 7 stone. Had to think really hard about where to get one though. So at the end of the day, I just decided forget it. And headed up to challenge the fire giant. Looking back on this fight, I made a lot of mistakes that I really shouldn't have. I pulled out the Mimic Tier way too soon, having him run way too far. Looking at that damage though, I was not impressed, and was very much ready for a slog of a fight. Trying to do most of this fight on horseback was definitely a mistake. I stayed at range too much, which allowed him to do his big, sweeping arcs, which dealt way too much damage. I ended up switching over to bleed bolts at some point during this fight, and just the damage difference is astonishing. All this time burning through all my bolts when bleed just does so much damage to the fire giant. I realized I was fighting an uphill battle here with little Estus Flask, so I decided to quit out and head towards Moog, thinking that Moog would be a much easier opponent. So summoning the Mimic Tier, and only using Bleed Bolts against him. And looking at that damage, just Bleed is a great tool to use in this game. Definitely makes almost all the bosses just easy. But their damage is definitely up there. So as we're just shredding through his health bar. When he starts to transition into a second phase, I just thought I could do this a lot better with his shackle. And then my Mimic Tier died. Doing a tactical retreat here, I wanted to go get his shackle and upgrade my Mimic Tier. So we headed to the Valiant Gargoyles, which are one of my least favorite fights in this game. Luckily, they weren't too ungodly difficult, but they did hit really hard, and Mimic died very early on. I think in total this fight took maybe about 10 minutes, which was a very long time to stay focused and not get slapped around. With them dead though, we head to the coffin and head up the waterfall to the Deep Root Depths. In the Deep Root Depths, we head to another coffin to head to the river. And then we crossbow whatever this thing is to death. I never really liked facing this enemy, and as far as I know, there's only one in the game, so definitely keeping this at range. Making our way down here, we find another bell so we can upgrade our Mimic Tier. Turning the bell in, we buy some more Ghost Wart Root. Upgrading our Mimic as high as we can, which is only +7 at the moment. And then finally discovered a Somber Stone 7 down in the sewer alongside of Moog's Shackle. Upgrading our pulley crossbow to a +9, we head back to Moog so that we can fight him once again. As soon as he gets close enough, we use the shackle and just melt his health bar. For the Lord of Blood, he is very weak to bleed. And within just a few seconds of his boss fight starting, he's already at half health. Using the shackle on him one more time, we lay him on the floor so that we can shoot him in the back. Getting those good back shots in before he stands up. While he's transitioning into second phase, we put as many arrows as we can into his back. Luckily, for some reason, Moog had a vendetta against our Mimic, so we got to really have this fight for free. Until he shanked me with his pitchfork right there and nearly one-shot me. Ending the run like that would have been very upsetting at this point. But luckily, Mimic gets that good old stagger on him, and we do the final bleed, and he goes 9-9. Definitely had to have a seat after that one. That was pretty rough on me. And throwing all the souls we get from him into health. Stocking up on some more bleed bolts for future fights. And back to the fire giant once again. Dodging his initial dinner plate slam, we pull out our Mimic Tier right at his feet this time, so that as soon as he comes out, he can start shooting and actually helping us during this fight. And already this early on in the fight, it was so much better with these bleed bolts. First phase went pretty smoothly, a few close calls here and there. All in all though, still one of my least favorite bosses, besides the Valiant Gargoyles. Moving into his second phase here, he was just even worse. He did not move a single inch. Threw a few fireballs at me and decided to lay down for his afternoon nap. And once again dumping all of his souls into health and burning the Tree. And making our way through Pharaoh Azul, there's not really anything I picked up here. Just ran straight through as fast as I could before the enemies caught up with me. Didn't even stop to fight a single enemy. Well, with this guy chasing me, I had to shoot a few arrows into him, but missed most of them, so decided to run. And taking a wrong turn, you would think that these two enemies are dispatch, with how much they were on me about being in the wrong place at the wrong time. After quitting out there, I decided to head back to Moog's Palace to head into the DLC, so I could check the vendors to see if they had any better arrows. They absolutely did not. And I also wanted the spread crossbow and the repeating crossbow, because I thought they would be much better. Grabbing the spread crossbow right there and testing it out. Having a shotgun in your back pocket in this game seemed like a really good idea. Newsflash, it was not. I never used this crossbow. And then grabbing the repeating crossbow, upgraded it. Running back through here, we start to head down towards the Godskin duo. I was very worried about this fight. I definitely have little experience with them and took a fireball right to the face when I was first pulling in the mimic. Looking at that bleed damage though so fast, I was a little enthusiastic about this fight. Then pulling out the repeating crossbow and shooting 10 bleed bolts into him with little to no reward on that. So I seen it as a big waste of ammo. So I just never used the repeating crossbow again after this. And after my mimic tier died, I kind of panicked and decided to quit out so I could try and gather some sleep pots to put one of them to sleep. Luckily, as long as you don't hit them directly, you don't deal damage to them. So I didn't see it as bending the rules or anything. But then I got very lost looking for this recipe book. Turns out it was below me the whole time. So heading down, I grabbed the right book this time. And unfortunately, I just needed mushrooms to make these sleep pots. So went, found some mushrooms, and then grabbed some crack pots. And I got bullied by a giant jar. Thinking about the poison bolts, I found out that I could craft them very easily by farming a flower. So I went and I took out the Mad Pumpkin Head for easy access to a bonfire right by a big plant. Trying the spread crossbow just to see how it does, I was not impressed at all with its damage. So realizing that my bolts were constantly hitting the pumpkin's head, I decided to free aim it and just shoot him in the calf. Ending the Mad Pumpkin's reign. This is the flower just outside the Pumpkinhead's boss arena. Quite an easy plant to kill, and all they do is just poison you and shoot light beams at you every now and then. With those flower petals that it dropped, that should be about 50 arrows per pop. Also grabbing a raw dumpling so that the mimic can heal itself. Heading back into the boss fight with bleed bolts alongside of poison bolts this time. And once again, taking a fireball to the ankle. Poisoning the fat one first because he does not dodge your arrows. And bleeding him as much as we can. We kill him, take on the skinny one, kill him, and back to the fat fight. With him getting stuck on these pillars a lot, it made it quite a bit easy to shoot him in his second phase. With the fat one dead and the skinny one resummoned, we take on the skinny one for the last time. This was definitely an annoying fight with the skinny one because of how often he dodged the arrows and how often you just miss. So when he stood still to resummon the fat one, it made it quite easy to put a lot of arrows into his face. And after taking another fireball to the left arm, I put a few more rounds into him and finished the fight. Moving right along to the next stop, we have the bird area. This area gave me a lot of trouble, way more than usual. These birds were just so aggressive this time. And continuing to run through, I realized there were 4 birds chasing me now. So I did a tactical retreat. And then when restarting, ran past everything because everything reset its positioning. Grabbing the last bell bearing, I don't really need that anymore. Just grab it out of force of habit. Heading back to some more plant farms before we go and take on Malekith. Moving into the Malekith fight here. Looking at the damage, I was once again not impressed by the pulley crossbow, but I had poison arrows and bleed bolts. So once again, the bleed carrying us as always. For having a giant rock thrown at my face, and then having little rocks thrown at my face, I heal up after quite a bit of damage. And then being slammed by his claw attacks. After a phase transition, we start on the Black Blade. Looking at how much damage he does, I got really worried here. But Mimic being at almost full health and taking his attention was a godsend at this point. After a very nice bleed proc, tragedy struck once again. I lost all the footage up until right before the first Elden Lord. And unfortunately, that really sucks. But on the good side, you all really didn't miss much. Malekith was almost dead, so a few more rounds into the back of his head, and he died. And as for the all-knowing, he did not really know anything other than how to roll away from my arrows. So with being tag teamed from the front and back by me and Mimic, we eventually put the old boy down. It was at this point in the run that I really wanted to stall. I have little experience with Horaloo, so I went back to the round table hold and discovered that the door was open. So I grabbed me some new armor, looked at it for a second, realized that it was way too heavy and I would fat roll with it, so I just left it where it was. And stalling even harder, I went back for some plant farming for probably no reason at all. And then stalling even harder than I already was, I went and fought the tree sentinel at the beginning of the game. Looking at this damage, I had high hopes for something. Not the final bosses, definitely not the final bosses. But I just wanted to feel powerful for a minute. And by feeling powerful, I mean being put into the dirt several times by his big halberd. Definitely the biggest weakness of the crossbow, besides its damage, is the inability to track things on horseback. With the enemies that ride horses, it always wants to target the top half and not the horse's forehead. So having to free aim a little bit, we did some pretty good damage to it after being slammed around a little more. And by a little more, I mean he almost killed me. That would be very pitiful to get to the very end of the game and die by the first boss you encounter right after the tutorial. Managing to put the horse down with its owner still attached, looks like we can't stall anymore. It's time to face the first Elden Lord. Actually, on second thought, I think we can stall a little longer, running back to the bonfire to sit down and have a nice hot cup of tea. Alright, I might as well kick myself into the fight. Throwing us straight into the action here, I stalled for quite a bit longer. Probably about an hour's worth of just running around in circles, trying to avoid this fight. After jumping way too soon and being knocked away by his blast radius, I began to get sloppy. I got nervous and thought about quitting out on this, but decided to stick with it, and I'm very glad that I did, because we got him into a second phase pretty soon after this.
That will be all. Thou didst me good service, Sirach.
Jumping into Horaloo here, I was a nervous wreck during this fight. I have little experience with him, even though he's a great boss, but a good stagger let us put some pretty good back shots on him. Then me and Mimic had the great idea to try and London bridge him, but that didn't work out too good, so he decided to do an AoE. And after nearly escaping with my life here, and then being grabbed, I was in full panic mode, hoping that the Mimic would take his attention or finish him off. Luckily, Mimic took his attention and actually finished him off here. And after nearly getting my shit rocked one more time, Mimic delivered the greatest back shot ever. Jumping right into the final boss here after dumping everything into health once more, we challenge Radagon. Looking at that move, Radagon can block my bolts, which is a big hindrance to a crossbow only build. And I have very, very little experience fighting this boss. So being hit by every little attack was pretty annoying. But this is what I get for not practicing sooner. And with this boss being almost completely immune to all status effects, bleed was not going to carry me through this fight. I had to go with raw damage. And unfortunately for me, the pulley crossbow did not have the raw damage I was wanting. But we were somehow hanging on by a thread. You can definitely tell just how much I suck at this boss fight, because I nearly died about 4 or 5 times already, just from silly little mistakes. And running out of flask right here, I could have quit out, but I decided to keep fighting as long as I could. And of course, by keep fighting, I clicked the pause menu for some reason, and instead of rolling, I backed out of the menu. And that is where this run ends. That was a very devastating death. It is really heartbreaking to get this far into the run just to die to Radagon, and not even being able to see the Elden Beast. But with a +9 crossbow, that was probably the most damage I was going to do. I did not have any buffs or any spells or anything like that. I could have gone back and got everything before I went this far, and in hindsight, I should have. But I decided to just go forth with raw damage. And this is where the run ends, unfortunately. Now, can you beat Elden Ring with crossbow only? Oh yeah, it's definitely possible. Did I beat it this time? No. But in the future, I'll probably revisit this run with the one life still intact. If I was not one life, I'd definitely continue to try. But that's just how the cookie crumbles right now. But with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, this is our last stop, and I will see you all next time the train rolls around.